Your Secretary of State says everyone who's here, citizens and non-citizens, deserve due process. Do you agree, Mr. President?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know.
Don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me, and they are going to obviously follow what the Supreme Court said.
Let's focus in right now on the president's comments on the Constitution and much more. Joining us right now is the Democratic governor of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul. It's good to have you here, Governor. Thank you so much. Let's start there where Mark and Sarah were talking about the president saying that he does not know if every person on U.S. soil should be afforded due process under the Constitution. What do you make of that after hearing the president?
He basically said that he doesn't have to follow or even understand what the Constitution of the United States requires of every person who takes that oath of office. I took the same oath of office 31 years ago to run for town board. I knew I was supposed to uphold the Constitution. I got to think a president who took the oath of office not once but twice understands that there are limitations, and that is the body of the Constitution. He must follow it. Otherwise, the democracy that we fought for and upheld for 250 years is just going to go down the drain, and we're not going to let that happen. But it was shocking, and it tells you all you need to know about this presidency and this man, that he doesn't give a damn about the U.S. Constitution, and that is frightening in itself.
CNN legal analyst and Georgetown Law Center professor Steve Vladeck joins us now. Obviously, a president swears an oath to uphold the Constitution. How do you view his remarks there?
Pretty stunning, Pamela. I mean, I think it's really remarkable. Here's a president who has taken this oath twice. And it's not a long oath, it's 35 words, and all it says is, I, will preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. This seems to be a president who is increasingly disinterested in what that means and what that requires of him, as we're seeing in all of these immigration cases.
And he repeatedly says, look, ask my lawyers. I listen to them. I have very brilliant lawyers. He also said he didn't know if the Fifth Amendment grants both citizens and non-citizens the same right to due process, claiming he was elected on this promise of mass deportations and that the courts are preventing him from doing that. Is the Fifth Amendment up for interpretation?
To a degree, but not like this. I mean, the text of the Fifth Amendment literally says no person, not no citizen. That's a conscious distinction. The Supreme Court for generations has said that the Fifth Amendment protects non-citizens, including undocumented immigrants. Just last month, the Supreme Court unanimously held, in the context of the Alien Enemy Act, that even undocumented immigrants subject to the Alien Enemies Act have a right to at least some process before they're removed. So, there's debate about how much process is due. There's just no debate that some process is due, because otherwise we won't be able to tell the difference between folks who the government claims are gang members and folks who are not.
And I just want to follow up on that, because there are Americans, and we've talked to people on this show who say, well, why do they get due process rights if they come here illegally? And why should they get the same rights as U.S. citizens? Again, just tell us why the Supreme Court over the years has upheld that right for non-citizens.
So it's not the same rights. I mean, the due process does vary under the circumstances. An undocumented immigrant does not have the same rights that a natural-born citizen does. But at the end of the day, if we weren't going to have any due process, what is to stop the government from pointing at any of us, you or me or anyone else on the street, and saying, oh, well, they're an undocumented immigrant and I can remove them summarily? The whole point of the due process clause is to make sure that before the government's allowed to take these very severe actions, we are confident that the people against whom these actions are being directed are who the government says they are. We've already seen with this administration how serious the risk of error is and why it's so important to have that check.
Right, because as last check, 2 judges, including the Trump-appointed judges, have ordered the administration to send back 2 people deported to El Salvador. President Trump said his lawyers will obviously follow the Supreme Court on his deportation policies. Is that happening right now?
To a degree. I mean, I think we're in this weird state right now where the administration is not openly defying these lower court rulings, but it's not trying that hard to comply with them. We're seeing a bit of a shell game, for example, in the case of Abrego Garcia, one of the 2 who was wrongfully removed to El Salvador, where the administration is saying one thing publicly and something else in court. So I think what we're seeing is kind of like in Jurassic Park, the velociraptors testing the fences. The administration is not overtly defying these rulings, but it's trying to see, Pamela, just how much it can get away with before the courts really push back.
I actually think that's a really important point, because I think a lot of people early on were just seizing on it and saying, oh, they're openly defying the Supreme Court. But there's more nuance to it. on that Supreme Court order, Trump says his lawyers have a different interpretation of facilitate and that he respects the Supreme Court. But it struck me during that interview with NBC's Kirsten Welker that he said he had inquired about asking for clarification from the Supreme Court and that the administration might actually do that. Do you see that happening?
Maybe. I mean,
I think clear up a lot of issues here with this.
I mean, it could. You know, the Supreme Court, I think, bears some responsibility for this. It was their order in the Abrego Garcia case that used these words, facilitate and effectuate, which are open to interpretation. I think part of the problem is that you have this district judge in Maryland who is trying very hard to get answers to what the administration has asked from President Bukele and the Salvadoran government, what it has not asked. And the administration is playing a bit of a sort of fast and loose dance in that court. Once we get those answers, Pamela, I think we'll be in a better position to figure out, has the administration actually done what it's supposed to do? Has it taken these steps? And what should it have to do going forward before we have more cases like this where folks are wrongfully removed to these foreign countries?
Right. And just follow up on that. And by the way, I don't think we know the status of the second person that the Trump-appointed judge said needed to be brought back. But I'm curious because the Supreme Court has not ruled on the merits of the Alien Enemies Act, right?
That's right.
Even though it says, you know, that the administration could continue on with the deportations under it. So, I mean, what do you do if then the Supreme Court says, actually, no, you can't use this act, but they've already deported all these people?
So I think there are two sets of questions here, and it might be helpful to keep them separate. The first is, going forward, what can the administration do with folks who are still in the U.S.? And that's where things have hit rather a pause button. There are now, I believe, 6 different orders covering 6 different federal district courts saying, no, you can't remove folks under the statute. And Pamela, 2 of those orders say that's categorical because the statute can't even be invoked against Trinidad. Let's assume that that all works out, that the Supreme Court eventually agrees and says no more removals under the statute. We still have 150, 175 men who were already removed under the Alien Enemy Act, where the courts might end up saying that was never lawful in the first place.
Right.
And that's when the fight becomes, what can a federal court do to say, hey, Secretary Rubio, right? Hey, Secretary Noem, you guys actually have to take affirmative steps. We're not talking about, you know, invading El Salvador, but you have to do whatever you can within the bounds of the law. Stop paying the Salvadoran government. Make requests for their release. That's going to be the real fight for the cases of folks who have already been removed.
And if you look at the Abrego Garcia case, the administration right now is saying, well, there's really nothing we can do. And so that would be very interesting if that happens.
And that hasn't been true historically. I mean, I think it's worth reminding folks that before this administration, there had been a long history, not a perfect history, but a long history of administrations of both parties being ordered by courts to bring folks back. And, you know, not always doing it quickly, not always doing it perfectly, but understanding that they had an obligation to do whatever was within their lawful power to do so. It's only now that we're seeing an executive branch dragging its feet. And the question is, what will the courts do if that impasse persists?
Steve Vladeck, thank you for fulfilling my inner legal nerd. I could spend the entire show talking to you about all of these legal issues of the day. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.